Just 1 second. All right, go ahead.
All right, everyone. This is the Clean Energy Alliance Board of Directors regular meeting for May 26, 2022. Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Certainly. Member Musgrove?
Present.
Member Acosta?
Here.
Member Insco?
Here.
Vice Chair Drucker?
Here.
And Chair Becker.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Very much. All right, today we have the pleasure of having Board Member Musgrove lead us in the flag salute.
Thank you. Please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Very good. All right, do we have any board member comments or announcements? Do we have any?
Yes.
Yeah.
So Barbara's going to talk about this more in depth, but we did get 4 responses to our RFP for legal services, and Barbara will go into detail about that in her report.
Great. So I assume your committee has met and did their.
We will be meeting to do interviewing of all of 3 of them on next Tuesday.
Very good. Thank you for that. All right. Do we have any presentations today?
I was just going to chime in because I'm meeting with Director Drucker on that, but I think it's on the agenda. So I think we'll be talking about it a little bit further later.
Yes, that would be great. Love to hear. All right. And any public comments?
There are no requests to speak.
All right. I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
Musgrove will move.
Second, Acosta.
All right. Call for the vote.
Member Musgrove?
Yes.
Member Insco?
Yes.
Member Acosta?
Yes.
Chair Drucker?
Yes.
Chair Becker.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Very good. All right. We have the consent calendar. And do we have any member of the public that has pulled an item? Or any member of the board would like to pull one of the consent calendar items? Looks like no. And there's there a motion then to move the consent calendar?
Insco will move.
Thank you.
Musgrove will second.
All right. Call for the vote.
Member Acosta?
Yes.
Member Musgrove?
Yes.
Member Insco?
Yes.
Vice Chair Drucker?
Yes.
Chair Becker.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right. Item number 5 is to approve the extension. Are we on item 5?
No, we should be at item
8.
8.
Yeah, item 8.
Oh, you're right. That didn't look right. Okay, great. We're on to new business. Item number 8. This is the Clean Energy Alliance Chief Executive Officer, Operational, Administrative, and Regulatory Affairs update. And before we hear that, do we have any any comments from the public on this item?
We have no requests to speak.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. I'll turn it over to our CEO.
Thank you. And I will need to just start and stop because my system freezes up. Okay. Thank you, Chair Becker and members of the board. I have a few items to highlight from my report. One is I'd like to touch on the expansion. Our first expansion upcoming in 2023 is providing service to the cities of Escondido and San Marcos. And we are scheduled to begin that service in April of 2023. And so while it's still just under a year away, we are in the process of setting ourselves up and taking care of tasks related to that implementation. So we have, as mentioned at the last meeting, we have received certification from the California Public Utilities Commission on our implementation plan amendment. In April of 2022, we submit what's called the year ahead resource adequacy filing to the California Public Utilities Commission. And we, for this filing, which was done in April for 2023, we did include the energy that is, we anticipate will be utilized for the cities of Escondido and San Marcos during calendar year 2023, beginning in April. And that has been filed. And then this month, we entered into an energy hedge contract that included electricity needs for the cities of San Marcos and Escondido. So we're bidding to buy electricity on behalf of those customers. In July, we'll receive our resource adequacy requirements, when it in essence is based on the year ahead filing. The PUC comes back and then tells us how much we need to procure in resource adequacy, what our fair share of maintaining reliability on the grid is. And that also will include that additional load related to the cities. In August, our Community Advisory Committee will consider the marketing and outreach strategy and talk about lessons learned from the enrollments of Carlsbad and Del Mar, and how we might change our strategy and what we might do different to achieve a good outcome with regards to enrolling Escondido and San Marcos. In October, we are required to have our resource adequacy contracts finalized, and we are submit those to the PUC, and we'll begin our marketing and outreach. We start that about 6 months prior to launch. And then in February, the notices go out. There are will be a total of 4 notices. 2 notices go prior to April, and then 2 notices after April. And then during the month of April, everyone does not begin service on April 1st. The enrollments occur throughout the month as the billing periods of the individual customers end. And so they transition on their normal billing period date. The second expansion that is under consideration is Oceanside Vista in San Clemente, which would be a 2024 service. And I do have a more full report later in the meeting, but just a quick snapshot of the timeline related to those. We have completed our initial analysis and assessment and reported back to the city. In May, we had a workshop with the Vista City Council, and then today is our CEA Board update. In June, the cities will be considering the resolution to join Clean Energy Alliance, and also the first reading of their ordinances establishing a community choice aggregation program. Those are scheduled for June 18th at the city of Oceanside, June 26th at Vista, and San Clemente is yet to determine the date. Then at the July meeting, assuming that those actions are taken by the city councils, the CEA board would consider the resolution approving those cities joining and directing preparation of the implementation plan amendment that we need to file with the Public Utilities Commission. Once the ordinance has become effective, which is 30 days after the second reading, the members are official, and the new board members can then be seated on the board. The implementation plan would come back to this board for approval in October and filed with the PUC by the end of December. As our subcommittee members mentioned, our request for qualifications for general counsel services closed on May 16th. We did receive 4 proposals from qualified firms, and have selected 3 to interview next week, with the goal being to narrow it down to at least 2 for the full board to meet with at a closed session on June 30th. So looking forward to continue moving forward on that process. That concludes my presentation. I will, if the board has no questions for me, I will turn it over to our regulatory attorney, Ty Tolstall, for his report.
I would just wanted to say really briefly a little kudos to our CEO at the Vista workshop. Our CEO stood at the podium for at least an hour answering some really thoughtful, comprehensive questions. And I was so proud of her. She did such a great job. And also the fact that Vista really was thoughtful in their questions. And it's clear that they've done their homework and that they're also really considering joining. So that was very nice. And I thank you for that time.
Thank
All right, regulatory update, Mr. Tosdall.
Thank you, Chair Becker. Thank you, Ms. Boswell. Good afternoon, board members. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I have some good news to report to everybody, which we'll talk about toward the end of the presentation. But we have a couple of favorable developments. Can everybody see my screen, by the way? Okay, great. Thank you. So wanted to provide an update on the net energy metering proceeding. There's been a new development, and I want to go over that with all of you in some detail. And then some good news, we had a favorable decision on a modified cost allocation mechanism, which I'll explain. And we also had our bilateral agreement with SDG&E for RPS resources approved by the commission as well. So I'll talk a little bit about that, and then we can wrap up with discussion of AB 2838 around the utility green tariff shared renewables costs. So net energy metering, just to refresh everybody, the Public Utilities Commission at the end of last year put out a very controversial proposed decision. And they've recently come out with a ruling indicating that they're going to be revising that proposed decision. And that they've identified 3 different areas that they're going to be looking into. And so the first area is the transitional rates, or what the Public Utilities Commission refers to as the glide path from NEM 2.0, which is the phase that we're in now, to NEM 3.0, which is what's being considered in the decision. Also, the commission is signaling with this ruling that they're going to be looking into the applicability of non-bypassable charges to NEM customers. And finally, they also included in this ruling several detailed questions about a community solar tariff, which is something that several of the solar parties had been pushing for in the proceeding, but was not in the proposed decision. So to set the stage here, the comments are due June 10th and reply comments are due June 24th. The ruling is very explicit that the proceeding will be resubmitted for decision following the reply comments. So what that means is the commission is telling the parties and the public that they're going to be reevaluating these 3 areas. They're not going to be reevaluating other areas. And when these comments are done, when this comment period concludes, they will be issuing a revised proposed decision and presumably not undertaking a review of any other subject matters. So wanted to go into a little bit of detail about some of these elements. You may have heard the term grandfathering used. The commission actually uses the term legacy periods, but what we're talking about here is, how long should customers who are on the current rates or even the previous NEM 1.0 rate schedules be allowed to continue before they're transferred over to NEM 3.0, and then by the same token, how long should the NEM 3.0 customers be entitled to the rates that are adopted here? And so the proposed decision included a 15-year legacy period for NEM 3.0 customers and for most customers. So that means 15 years from the time of your interconnection agreement, you're guaranteed the rate. That was a decrease from 20 years from the previous decision. So this got a lot of attention. Sorry, you could be on one slide ahead. Sorry, or a couple slides ahead. Sorry, got off track there. So the grandfathering rules were substantially changed as part of the proposed decision. The proposed decision also adopted a grid participation charge, which had not been adopted previously, set at $8 per kilowatt. And you may remember that a residential homeowner system is about six kilowatts. So that would mean a $48 per month charge. There's also a market transition credit that was adopted to ensure that the growth of distributed resources would take place. And so that was a spread across the different utilities. The proposed decision also required NEM customers to enroll in a single TOU rate, time of use rate, whereas there was some more optionality previously, some other options for customers. And then finally, the solar parties argued for but did not get a community solar tariff. So the proposed decision, like we discussed previously, very controversial. The areas that the commission is going to be specifically looking into, one is the market transition credit. It's based on a avoided cost model. The ruling proposes to sort of beef up the market transition credit so it's a little bit easier for customers to transition. This would be stepped down over time. So we're talking about the transitional rates here being potentially revised to be a little bit more modest. Or I'm sorry, a little bit larger so that customers stepping down from one NEM rate scheduled to another won't be so heavily impacted. Commission's also looking into non-bypassable charges and how they should be applied. And just to define that, non-bypassable charges they currently include the PCIA, the public purpose program charge, nuclear decommissioning charges, and then a couple of charges from the energy crisis, the competition transition charge, and the DWR bond charges. So the ruling proposes that non-bypassable charges be collected on gross consumption, meaning you can't net out the non-bypassable charges with your generation credits from the amount from the power that you generate. And there are a number of detailed questions on this area as well for the parties. And then finally, the ruling indicates that the commission is looking at adopting a community solar tariff. You know, these tariffs are opt-in subscription programs typically that permit customers to purchase the output of a facility, solar generating facility. The solar parties had argued for a broad solar tariff that improved on an existing program that the commission has called the Community Solar Green Tariff. The proposed decision did not include this solar tariff, but the solar parties did something interesting that I wanted to share with you all. They sponsored a bill in the legislature that would have created a community solar tariff while the regulatory proceeding was underway. And this bill got some traction, and the commission turned around and then issued this ruling indicating that they're going to take this up. So interesting, I think, strategy for us all to take note of in terms of using the legislature and the regulatory agency sort of, together. And so there's a bunch of questions here that also I think are interesting and kind of provide insight about where the commission's going with community solar tariff. Several detailed questions about benefits for renters and low income earners, whether a 20% bill discount should be applied similar to the community solar green tariff program, and a number of other questions about implementation, enforcement, and examples of this policy at work in other states. So those are the three different areas that the commission signaling they're going to be looking into. I think it's reasonable for us to expect changes to that original decision in these areas. What those changes are, we can't tell at this point. But I do think, given the controversy around this decision and the ruling that we're receiving now, it's likely that the commission is going to be looking at making changes to make the decision a little bit more favorable to rooftop solar owners and not quite so severe in terms of the rate structure. So I just want to pause there for a moment. I know I've said a lot, and so I want to pause there if there are any questions about what's going on with the net energy metering proceeding and so forth. So any questions at this point about that?
I don't see any.
No
Okay.
questions, but thank you for the update, because I've gotten a lot of questions, and everything that I could find online was things are still in flux. Nothing's scheduled for decision quite yet, but this is a really helpful presentation. Thank you.
Okay, appreciate that. Yeah, based on the schedule here, I think the earliest we might see a decision is in the September-October timeframe. This is so controversial, it might get pushed out later, but that would be the earliest that I would anticipate a decision. Okay, well, now on to some good news. As I mentioned earlier, we had two favorable decisions that came out of the commission in the past couple of weeks. One was this decision on this modified cost allocation mechanism. I realize that's a mouthful. There was an old decision that we discussed a couple of times, D1911-016, and it ordered SDG&E to procure system RA according to its load share at the time. Unfortunately, it didn't make provision for CEA or SDCP. And so what we were going to be looking at was, SDG&E was going to have a substantial amount of these resources, and they were not going to have the load to the customers to purchase all those resources. So these were costs were most likely going to end up in our exit fees or PCIA. And so fortunately, we were able to work with SDCP, and we filed a series of motions and conducted a few ex partes with the commissioners' advisors. We were able to persuade the commission to sort of carve out a path for us to contract directly with SDG&E to procure these resources. So good outcome for us. It wasn't exactly what we asked for, but we will take it. And so we're glad to see that go forward. The decision contemplates that those transactions will be put before the commission in October of this year. So we look at negotiating this over the summer. And then I don't have a slide for it, but also wanted to mention that our RPS deal with SDG&E was also approved by the commission. We had a couple of protests related to the timing of it in connection with some of the allocation activities that the commission is doing. But those didn't prove to be too problematic, just minor delays. The commission decided in our favor. So we have that agreement approved, and that will help us. Both these decisions will help us meet our various regulatory compliance requirements. So. Last item for everybody, Assembly Bill 2838. This bill would permit SDG&E to obtain recovery of excess costs related to its eco-choice program from non-participating ratepayers, including CCA customers. The cost recovery would still need to be approved by the CPUC, but this bill is, I think, problematic in its own right. It turns this whole idea of ratepayer indifference on its head. The bill has, at this point in time, now passed the Assembly, been referred to the Senate Energy, Utilities, and Communications Committee. And so definitely looking to get our letter out on this as soon as possible. Those are all the items that I have for you, and so happy to answer any questions as this is going on.
It's frustrating that Assembly bill members would vote on that. I just cannot wrap my head around that. Vice Chair Drucker, question?
Yes. So what is the possibility of it passing the Senate at this point? Number one, and number two, is there something we can do with President Pro Tem Atkins to see if she could kill it, or is she going to line up behind SDG&E?
I will say, Board Member Drucker, that this bill passed the Assembly quite quickly. So my concern is that it's headed for approval in the Senate unless we do something. I don't think there's been a lot of opposition to it out there. And so as far as what can be done with Senator Atkins, I leave that to others on the call here and board members.
Do they take it as an equity issue that it's,
Chair Becker, my impression, my understanding of what's gone on in the legislature here has been that this has sort of sailed through without a lot of debate or notice.
That's a shame.
Yeah.
Board Member Costa?
Yes, I just wanted to say again, I think I've said this before. I try to say this at all the boards and organizations that I'm a part of, that I'm a very willing advocate, on behalf of our organization. If we need to make a call or send an email, I will. And then I also sit on my city council legislative subcommittee. We consider bills all the time. We have monthly or more than monthly meetings to talk about bills. And if it fits with our legislative platform, we'll also take a position and send letters and advocate as well on behalf of the city of Carlsbad. So just let us know what we can do. And I definitely can see, that we need to take positions here in addition to the positions being taken at the larger organization protecting, I guess it's Cal CCA, right? Representing all the CCAs. I think it's helpful to have multiple voices, sometimes quantity as well as quality. We do need to have a barrage of voices calling in to our legislators to say, hey, wait, take a pause, look at this. It may have unintended consequences or negative consequences that you haven't thought about. So I'm happy to advocate, just need a little push and maybe some talking points sometimes. That would be helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it would make sense if Christy, you and I talk to Tony, seeing how she is our state senator, still is our state senator. And she does have a little bit of clout there, but I don't know if she'll listen to us. But I mean, would it make sense for us to chat with Deanna Spain, her legislative analyst?
I'd be happy to do that with you. If you want to try to set that up, that would be great. And Barbara, you've got the letter that you're going to be sending as well.
So
Get that out sooner rather than later. Is there someone else that we could really target that has some influence besides Tony?
well, who's Carlsbad and San Marcos and Escondido state senator?
Our state senator is Pat Bates and our assembly member is Tasha Burner Horvath. I think it would depend like where the bill is, maybe a committee chair as well. We can try. I have
the assembly and Pat Bates is not running again, right?
Right. She's done.
Turned out.
Yeah, Kathleen Blake Spears running for that seat. So, it is still this legislative session,
Right.
So we could still advocate with Senator Bates. I was just up there for advocacy days with the League of California Cities, and we just saw her the other day, and I'd be happy to place another call.
And what about Escondido and San Marcos?
We can reach out to Senator Jones.
Senator-
Tina and I will do it.
Brian Jones, yeah.
Okay. Well, I guess I will have to reach out to Deanna
Okay.
because I know Tony won't meet with us. If you could cue something up for me, Barbara, so that I could reach out to Deanna
Yeah.
Spain.
We'll put some talking points together. And get
Okay.
those out.
That would be helpful. And then of course, having the letter, the final letter once it is sent that we can refer to.
Yeah. And we'll address it to more generic to the elected, officials. So, yeah.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
That works.
All right, Mr. Tosdahl, I'm not feeling like that was really like a lot of good news now that we ended on that one, but
I try.
thank you. Thank you.
I try
so
my
much.
best. Yeah, I wish I could bring you more good news more frequently.
I know it's a lot of work you've done, so thank you.
Thank you.
All right, anything else on item number 8? Otherwise, we'll move on. Item number 9 is our review of our proposed fiscal year 2022-23 budget and schedule adoption for the June 30th, 2023 regular board meetings.
And I do want to make a correction. The adoption will actually happen in June 30, 2022. I got so used to typing
Okay.
2023 that I
should have
did
got that, yeah.
error there. Yeah. Okay, here we go. All right, so the item before you, it's the time of year where we're bringing forward the proposed fiscal year 2022-23 budget for review with the board and discussion and input. And then we will schedule it for adoption at the next regular meeting, which is June 30, 2022, to be effective on July 1st, the next day. So the first step in the process, we took a look at how we're doing in the current fiscal year. How do we think we're going to end in terms of revenue collections and expenditures compared to the budget that was adjusted at mid-year by the board. And our revenues are coming in pretty much on target with where we expected them to come in. On the expenditure side, we actually anticipate some savings. $1 million of that savings is power supply costs, where things are coming in now as compared to the forward price curves and the estimates that we made at mid-year. We're also achieving savings in our legal services and also our professional services. So the differential between the revenue that comes in and the expenditures will go into our reserves and help to increase our reserves. The proposed budget were based on the following assumptions. First is the revenues are based on our current adopted rates. So there's no anticipated either increase or decrease in our rates that we charge customers built into this budget. The power supply costs are based on our actual executed contracts, as well as using the May forward price curve for those energy needs that are don't have contracts executed to cover. So we have about 95% of our projected energy needs for next year in contracts, and that additional 5% is the portion that is based on the day ahead price when that period comes up. Consulting services are based on approved contracts, as discussed with the board at prior meetings. The priorities and goals that were utilized in creating the budget and bringing it forward to the board for consideration. One is ensuring financial stability. So we continue our conservative approach with regards to our administrative and overhead costs, and really still focused on building reserves and ensuring financial stability. We also are focused on regulatory compliance, meeting our procurement requirements, meeting our reporting requirements, and preparing reports and filings for the PUC. And last but certainly not least is a successful expansion in Escondido and San Marcos. So while we don't have new and exciting programs yet in the budget, we are very excited about the expansion and the efforts that we will be undertaking over the next year with regards to that launch and minimizing opt-outs. When we take a big picture look at our proposed budget and compare it to our fiscal year 21-22 estimates, we see that revenues are projected to be about $17.5 million higher than the current fiscal year. And that really is due to taking into account the additional revenue generated by serving the customers in Escondido and San Marcos. And the same applies for the expenditure increase. We have about $18.5 million in increases in expenditures, primarily related to the power procurements needed to serve the new customers, and also related to the increased cost of energy. The market has been experiencing increases in the price of energy, the forward price curve, and to the extent that we have open positions, those are exposed or volatile to these increased prices. The budget as proposed is balanced. We have sufficient revenue generated at our current rates to cover our costs and leave about $2.4 million in funds that would go into our reserves. That $2.4 million, though, however, does not meet our 5% reserve requirement. And so this is not a final budget. We're going to continue to refine our numbers and work on bringing our expenditures down to a point where we are within our reserve requirements. We are proposing new positions in the budget. Two of those positions I shouldn't classify as new because we have had them being filled in an interim basis. Both of these positions are required under the Joint Powers Agreement that the board appoint them. The first is Chief Financial Officer and Treasurer. And that function, since the time that CEA was formed, has been fulfilled by Marie Bercuti. At the time that she was appointed interim CFO Treasurer, she was Director of Finance with the City of Solana Beach. She has since retired, but at the point in time she retired, she was gracious enough to agree to continue performing those services through a contract. She's now expressed that her availability is becoming more and more limited, and that she foresees potentially not being available after August the 31st. And so the budget does take into account transitioning from an interim to a permanent position. We also have a board secretary that's very similar. That board secretary position appointment is required by the JPA and has been filled by Sheila Cobian. Sheila Cobian was a city clerk with the city of Carlsbad, and through a contract with Carlsbad, she has been the appointed board secretary. Although the day-to-day duties related to the board are performed by Susan Caputo, who's our interim board clerk, and she's with us today. Neither of those positions are at this point, I would consider full-time. And certainly we can look for alternative ways to fill them, but the budget does take into account bringing them on as permanent employees. Then we have 3 new positions that are being recommended for the coming year. The first is an account services program manager. That position will be tasked with managing the enrollments in Escondido and San Marcos, developing the marketing and outreach plan, putting that plan into motion, developing relationships with key accounts, not only in Escondido and San Marcos, but also within our current operating cities of Carlsbad, Del Mar, and Solana Beach. We want to become more proactive in reaching out to our key accounts, establishing relationships, understanding their needs, talking about how we can help them meet their goals as an important business entity within our territory. The position will also be tasked with developing our programs and being creative in seeking out funding sources for those programs so we can get them off the ground even before we have funding available from our revenue base. We have proposed also a procurement manager, and the position would be responsible for not only energy procurements, but non-energy procurements, managing contracts, ensuring we're staying on top of the insurance requirements, for example, of our contracts that we have in place, developing our supplier diversity program. You might recall that an associate from Ty Tosdal's firm provided an overview of an upcoming requirement that we have coming in 2023 to track and report our procurements as it relates to the CPUC mandated supplier diversity program. So we need someone that is going to work on that program for us. The last position that's being recommended is a regulatory analyst. As the discussion today shows, we seem to have more and more regulatory and legislative activity that has impacts to our business and our ability to be competitive, and could have negative impacts to our customers. And so the recommendation is that we bring someone on who can stay on top of those, work on developing our outreach plans, working with the board in working with our legislative folks and talking about these bills and regulatory activities. There's also a lot of activity at Cal CCA, and they have a number of different working groups that they like to have participation from the CCAs. And, at this point, we've had very limited participation just because we haven't had the staff to be involved. And as we grow, that need for us to be more active participants grows. So with those positions, this is a snapshot of what the organization chart would look like. It includes the positions that are appointed by the board include the general counsel, the CFO, and the board secretary, and the board clerk reports down under the board secretary. The 3 new positions would be direct reports of the chief executive officer. This is the line item detail of the proposed budget. providing information on all of our line items. And you can see at the bottom here, our mid-year adjusted budget anticipated net results of operations at 2.2 million and an ending fund balance of a negative 479,000. We did start the year with a negative 2.7 million, which is not unusual. We incurred significant costs related to procurements even before we started selling energy. So it's normal for a CCA to have a negative fund balance in its first year of operation. With our year-end estimates, our net results of operation is increased to 3.5 million. So we turn that around and would have a positive ending fund balance of 797,000. With our proposed budget, we would be at net results of 2.4 million with a total reserve of 3.2 million. That reserve does fall short of our policy of 5%. And so we will continue to refine our budget and work diligently to bring forward a budget that's not only balanced, but achieves our 5% reserve for the coming year. In terms of next steps, again, we'll continue to work on those numbers and bring forward the budget that meets our 5% reserve. And it will be before the board for consideration and adoption on June the 30th. And that does conclude my presentation, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Have any questions? Well, I think Board Member Musgrove had his hand up quicker.
That's okay.
You're next.
Oh, I'm not trying to race anyone to the finish line. Sorry, Tina.
Go
You
right
know,
ahead.
Barbara, as I'm looking at the org chart and knowing we are potentially taking on, well, let's see, probably close to 350,000, maybe a little bit more in population with Vista, Oceanside, and San Clemente, and then with Escondido, San Marcos, another 250,000. I don't think it's out of the realm of reasonableness for us to discuss not where are we going to host our meetings, but should we consider a location, a physical location that would meet the needs, so that with the staff that you're proposing, some of them will be full-time. They would have somewhere to come to work, and we would have somewhere to meet, so we could set up our own operation for those times where we do need to, or we can't have a quick remote meeting. We could have that, and then we have a public place to post notices for our meetings. Just a thought. And I'll lower my hand. Thank you, Tina.
Board
My
Member
pleasure. My pleasure, Ed. Was there a response to that, or is that just for discussion later on?
I just wanted to plant the seed so we can all start thinking about it, because as we grow, we I think it lends some degree of, if not legitimacy, then purpose that we have. The fixed location doesn't do that, but we intend to be a permanent operation, and so this is where we're going.
Mm-hmm. Well, I certainly would echo that thought and consideration. So I'm happy to say that. I had just a couple of things regarding the new positions, and Barbara and I did talk about this in our brief. Barbara, can you clarify regarding the board secretary, the duties currently that Susan is doing in that regard? And would that be a consideration to have her combine those efforts?
Yeah, so the JPA requires that the board appoint a board secretary. However, with our current arrangement with the city of Carlsbad being an interim, and that position had a full-time job with the city of Carlsbad and not being available full-time, or not having much available time to devote to supporting the needs of Clean Energy Alliance, we did hire Susan through a contract as an interim basis to perform the day-to-day duties. And so while the responsibilities as board secretary fall on Sheila Kubian, the day-to-day actual duties are being handled fully by Susan. She is a certified municipal clerk, so she does have the skills and required knowledge and education with regards to that. But the official stamp or name and the responsibility lies with Sheila. And I think that's part of her thinking that she doesn't have a day-to-day connection yet. At the end of the day, she has the title. And so there's a little bit of a disconnect between the person who has the responsibility, but not actually being hands-on day-to-day, and, who's doing the work. And so it makes sense to kind of try to merge those together.
And so does that involve a title change then, since we are required by law to have a board secretary?
If the board desired and wanted to have Susan become classified as the board secretary, that certainly the board would have discretion to do that. And it would be a change in the contract with Bayshore, but that is certainly an option and board discretion.
Well, I'd be interested to hear what my colleagues think about that. And then I just have one other question in regards to the account services program manager. Under the description you talk about, and I think you and I discussed this a little bit the other day as well, pursuing the funding opportunities, which we know a lot of grants are out there. And so thinking about that and looking at the procurement manager, because they will be fulfilling some mandated things, I wonder if we should be keeping an eye out. And Cal Cities is a really good resource for this, to find out if there are going to be perhaps some funding for some of these mandated things that are coming down to us. So I would just throw that out. And again, I'd like to hear my colleagues regarding the board secretary position. Thank you.
Vice Chair Drucker?
Yes, so, having Susan as both secretary and clerk, I think makes a whole lot of sense. My understanding is she actually is a certified clerk, which is important. So I think that makes sense. Just want to comment about a physical building. We will have to have a robust discussion about that as our reserves increase, as to how much we want to spend on a physical building versus how much we want to do in terms of creating our own power sources, et cetera. So we'll just have to have a discussion. I think that's a few years away, though, in terms of where we need to go. The only caution I would have is it probably makes sense for us to have an office building, but to have our own place where we hold meetings, et cetera, could get a little expensive. And like Delmar City Hall, our town hall, our place where we hold meetings is empty probably 80% of the time. I'm sure San Marcos and Escondido and Carlsbad also, their places where they hold public meetings are pretty empty. So an office building will probably make sense. The interesting thing, I guess, again, we're going to have a robust discussion about that. The other thing is whether or not, that will be a key decision, because Barbara does not live in the area. So, and gas prices are not going to go anywhere. So.
Very good. Thank you. Board Member Acosta.
Yes, thank you. I love the discussion about this. I shared with Barbara the other day, with Ms. Boswell the other day, that I'm so excited about what a lean and mean operation we've had, and everybody's excitement about creating the Clean Energy Alliance, the way that we've been able to lean on our member agencies, whether it was Carlsbad for Ms. Cobian's assistance, or any of the other organizations that have stepped up to help out. And as an entrepreneur and a small business owner myself, I know at the beginning you have to be scrappy, and you have to get all of your assistants, volunteered, and people to do a little extra work. And I'm just so proud of how far we've come. Just reading about it and watching it. I wasn't on the council when when Clean Energy Alliance first came together, but now being a part of it is so exciting, and seeing us move into this next phase. And similar to a business, when you're first starting up, or even my daughter's high school, Sage Creek High School was brand new. She was the very first class to ever go into it, and they they really formed that high school together. So to be part of something new and to create it together does require a lot of innovation and collaboration and leaning on others. And sometimes, you know, the old tried and true way of doing things might not work. So I also feel that we can be creative, and we might not need to have, you know, an office building or, you know, a set office for some time, because we look around us at kind of the technology and the availability of space, physical space that our partners do have. And I very much agree that that might be something we talk about later. But for the city clerk, I'm super grateful to Ms. Caputo for her assistance, and I'm, you know, happy to go with Ms. Boswell's recommendations. And I just have to say what a fan I am. Ms. Boswell's done such a wonderful job of you know, being our CEO and, you know, helping make sure that we are being very fiscally responsible. Carlsbad, we just passed a preliminary budget on Tuesday, and I kept talking about that fiscal responsibility and frugality and how important that is to me. So I'm really pleased to see what we've done here and how we've been able to serve the public in this way. So thank you for all of your hard work, and I'm happy to go with your recommendation.
Very good. And Ms. Caputo, we're talking about you, and you're right here. And I hope you know that we're just so grateful, and all of it is very complimentary, and we know that you can do the job. And so I hope it's not uncomfortable for you, but we're just really happy with your performance. So
Thank you so very much.
all right, very good. So I think if there's nothing else on that, and there's no public comment on this item,
There is no public comment.
okay, we can move on to item 10. And we're
And
going-
Chair
Yes.
Becker, before we move on, I want to echo Board Member Acosta's comments. We wouldn't be where we are without the support of our founding cities and offering their staffs. And we've appreciated Ms. Cobian, but not only Ms. Cobian, but the staff of the Carlsbad City Clerk, who have worked with us to get systems in place to make sure we're on track with our records, to assist with the Form 700s. And it's all work behind the scenes that people don't see, but it was added work to their day-to-day operations. And I know they're all more than full-time workload as it is, and it's been very much appreciated. And same with Ms. Bercuti. You know, she retired from the city of Solana Beach and was willing to continue on, and has just done an amazing job helping us to achieve our execute our lines of credit, work, you know, tirelessly during the months, and help us with establishing now an accounting firm that is keeping us now going and very robust, and just appreciate all that she's done for us as well.
Yeah, that continuity was really important. Ms. Bercuti, thank you so much. So,
Okay, so moving on.
yes, we are at an update and assessment.
Yeah. So this is a report with regards to our potential additions of the cities of Oceanside, San Clemente, and Vista. And I do want to recognize that our assessment report is prepared by our technical advisors at Pacific Energy Advisors. We have John DeLacy and Alden Walden, who both have been instrumental in developing the report that we are summarizing for you at this point in time. And they are available for questions, so I'll run through this report, and if the questions become too technical, then I'm gonna call upon them to jump in and assist. But they've done a great job at pulling all of this together for us. So we do have a policy. We have a new member policy that establishes the criteria under which we will add new members. And that includes an analysis of looking at the proposed members' electricity usage, and that analysis results in a positive financial result using CEA's pro forma model. And I think that's key, because we want to make sure we're using our rates and our costs that we are currently have in looking at whether or not this is a positive impact on CEA. Also, the addition of the new members should not create an undue risk or financial burden to CEA. and also at not create an undue risk to the achievement of the goals of CEA, including the achievement of the climate action plan goals of the current members. And that's key because CEA was formed for the primary purpose of achieving the climate action plan goals of our member agencies and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. The analysis that was completed was performed using calendar year 2021 electric data usage data received from SDG&E, and that was then put into CEA's current pro forma model. We assumed an April 2024 enrollment, and we used our current customer rates. There was no assumption for an increase or a decrease in those rates. We assume a 90% participation rate. We know that not everyone will want to be served by CEA and will choose to opt out and stay with SDG&E. And to be conservative, we assume 10% of the customers will opt out. Our current opt-out rate for CEA is right around 7%. So that's a fairly conservative number in terms of using it for financial analysis. And then the number one cost for serving customers is power supply. So we're using our current cost of power and for forward price curves in looking at serving those customers. So this summary is for all three cities. It's Oceanside, Vista, and San Clemente. And you can see here, this line here, net operating margin, takes into account the revenue generated. And so fiscal year 2025 would be the first full fiscal year of serving those customers. The revenue generated does generate sufficient revenue to cover the operational costs. But when we apply then our 5% reserve contribution, it falls short. In fiscal year 2024, the reserve, the amount available for reserves is 4%. Not 5%, so it's just slightly below the 5%. In 2025, the reserve contribution is 2.5%, and in 2026, it's 4.9%. So we start coming back up. What's driving that is the power supply costs. In recent months, we've been seeing an increasing costs of power supply in our forward price curves. When we initially did this assessment, the 5% reserve contribution was met, and we actually had a net surplus. With using today's power supply costs, that has changed. And that will continue to change over the course between now and until the point in time where we enter into contracts to serve those customers. We continually are going to need to update this model and monitor how we are doing as compared to the revenues. In order to achieve the 5% reserve, we would need to increase our rates, or the rates to those customers, to achieve the 5% reserve contribution in each year, and they would need to be increased 2.5%. So the next step in the process is we looked at what is the impact to the individual customer. So we prepared a bill comparison for each of the three cities, and we do individualized comparisons because the average usage, household usage, is different amongst each of the three cities. So we look at individually, what would the average bill look like as compared to SDG&E. We did it on two bases. One is using our current generation rates, and then we did the same comparison, but increasing it by that 2.5%, which would result in achieving our 5% reserve contribution. You can see with today's rates, as compared to SDG&E, there is savings in each of the three power supply products. We have our clean impact, which is a minimum 50% renewable, 75% carbon free, and 100% renewable. And in each of these three, including the 100% renewable, we would achieve a savings ranging from 1.5% savings total, and that's total bill, on clean 100% renewable green impact, up to 3.5% savings on our clean impact. If we use rates that are 2.5% higher, there's still savings achieved. The total bill savings on the green impact would be just under 1%, and then it increases to just under 2.8% for the 50% renewable clean impact. Similar results are seen in San Clemente because they do have similar usage. It ranges from 1.5% to 3.5% savings under the current rates, and just under 1% at the 100% green to 2.8% on the 50% green. It is notable that we assume SDG&E has the same rates. That may not likely be the case, in 2024, but we do utilize that just for our comparison purposes. City of Vista, also very similar, 1.5% to 3.5%. So we are able to, there is room to increase rates in order to have sufficient funds to cover the costs and the reserves and still achieve a savings. In addition to financial considerations, we also need to think about the procurement considerations. One area that we really need to consider is with regards to resource adequacy. And resource adequacy is the program that all entities that serve customers, fill their electric needs, need to participate to their fair share in ensuring sufficient energy on the grid, reliability of the grid, and make sure we have enough energy when demand is there. Resource adequacy increases as our load increases. So the amount of resource adequacy that we would need to contract for would increase significantly with the addition of these 3 cities. It would require us to work very closely with SDG&E to acquire what would become their excess resource adequacy related to the departures. It's not a foregone conclusion that SDG&E would make that product or power supply available to us. And it would put us at risk. It does put us at risk if we're unable to contract for the resource adequacy needs that we have. We could be found non-compliant and subject to penalties if we aren't able to fulfill our obligation. And because the resource adequacy supply is constrained in our area, it would require working closely with SDG&E to ensure that we meet that compliance. The other area of consideration is with regards to the long-term renewable energy. We are required to have a certain portion of our portfolio in long-term contracts, which are defined as 10 years or longer. And the PUC looks at compliance in what they call compliance periods. The current compliance period ends on December 31st, 2024. So we launched with the cities of Carlsbad, Del Mar, and Solana Beach in 2021, and we had until the end of 2024 to execute contracts for long-term renewable energy and meet our compliance requirements. With launching in April of 2024, we really only have a few months until the end of the year to have met that compliance requirement. And it does become quite, I think, challenging and does require, again, a real cooperation with SDG&E in order to acquire what would become excess contracts with SDG&E. We've been successful in negotiating and working with them on acquiring excess long-term renewable energy. But I don't think that we can just assume that that's going to take place, and we really need to begin talking to them quickly. Again, it's an area of risk because if we're found to be non-compliant, there are repercussions to that if we aren't able to reach an agreement with SDG&E. The voluntary allocation methodology, I think, establishes a pathway for us to acquire excess long-term renewable, but SDG&E would have to show those as excess and make those available. And so we would need to start working right away and entering in discussions with SDG&E. One option that the board may want to consider to reduce that risk is to postpone enrolling these customers from April 2024 until 2020, calendar year 2025, because that will be the beginning of a new 4-year compliance period. And then that gives us 4 years to meet that long-term renewable requirement instead of just, you know, a few months, 8 months. So in terms of next steps, it's a mix of steps that will be CEA board actions and the city actions. We are here today, May 26th, bringing to the board the assessment report results. In June, each of the cities will be considering their resolutions to join CEA, have the first reading of the ordinance, with the second reading following in either late June or July. At the end of July, CEA would be considering the resolution approving the city's joining and directing the preparation of the implementation plan amendment. I've had it added on here, another action, which is to review the updated financial impact. Because we've been seeing such steady climbs in the cost of energy, I think it's something we need to keep tabs on, and we need to keep monitoring the impact of the energy market to see if it's continuing to increase, or if there's been some relief and now it's coming back down. The next action would be the CEA board would be approving the implementation plan amendment. And I've added along in there again, review the financial impact, reassess the financial impact of serving these customers beginning in April 2024. Because at these points, there's no repercussions to postponing or waiting. We haven't entered into contracts. We haven't been received any type of obligations related to serving them. Assuming we're continuing to move forward, we would be filing the implementation plan amendment with the PUC in December. We would have the time that we're really committed to the April 2024 launch date would be when we file our year ahead resource adequacy, which would be in May. We would be preparing it in April of 2023. So we really have between now and then to finalize and make a firm commitment on when the service establishment would start for those cities. That concludes my presentation, and I know John and Alden are there and available to answer questions, but happy to entertain comments and questions from the board. Thank you, Chair Becker.
Thank you for that. Do we have any questions, comments? Seeing none. Oh, we have Vice Chair Cooper.
Yeah, so in terms of pushing back the implementation of this to Oceanside and San Clemente, what is the probability that they may turn around and say, well, let's not join and let's go with San Diego Community Power? Is there any thoughts on that?
Well, San Diego Community Power operates under the same regulatory requirements that we operate under, and they would be facing the same risks and challenges that we're facing. I don't think there would be much difference. I can't speak for SDCP other than to say that, you know, I wouldn't expect there to be a significant advantage or increased. If we determine that postponing them to 2025 presents the least amount of risk, I don't know that SDCPs would have any lower risk than we do.
The other comment I have is that it's, you know, San Diego Gas and Electric has already announced their major increases over the next few years. So our assumptions are quite conservative, and most likely we will be able to raise rates so that we continue to have, you know, be less than SDG&E, but our rates obviously are going to go up. Everybody in the county's rates are going to go up no matter what. So conservative, you know, you've done this conservatively, and you know, but SDG&E is going to have a major increase next year.
Board Member Musgrove.
Thank you very much, Chair. I know one electron doesn't know from another electron. But when we talk about the availability, if SDG&E and their continuing customers are subject to either a spike or a temporary brownout, but yet we have a contract for service and they are simply the conduit, we're still subject to the same energy reduction or brownouts, if you will. Is that a fair assessment? Because I've had questions asking, will this guarantee us a more reliable source of energy when as the summer continues on and we are already been forewarned by the governor that there will be some energy issues?
Yeah. I wish we could say that being a CEA customer puts you in a better position than the remaining bundled SDG&E customers when it comes to potential brownouts or flex alerts. The grid is maintained by the California Independent System Operators, the CAISO, and the CAISO is the entity that manages what's the supply and what's the demand, and they determine those periods of time where the demand is going to exceed supply and customers need, we start sending out those emergency alerts. And it doesn't matter if you're a CCA customer, an IOU customer, or direct access, taking from contracts from another source. All are subject and to the same supply constraints on the grid.
All right. Anything else on this? And this will just be keep coming back to, oh, one more. Board Member Insco. I think you're still muted. There we
I
go.
certainly am. Thank you, Chair Becker. Just very quickly, I also would like to echo the comments about the conservative approach to this. I think that is wise. And I thank Barbara and the consultants and the team for bringing that to our attention. And I agree that reviewing that cost of energy periodically, I think is going to be very important and hopefully will serve as a tool for us. As far as the long-term relationship with SDG&E, I'm hoping that perhaps one of those new positions that we're bringing on will help to keep that line of communication strong and hopefully moving in a positive direction. So that's all I wanted to share. I do appreciate the conservative view of the long term. And again, I appreciate the questions of how that might affect those cities if we decide that we need to take a more longer term approach to bringing them on board.
So I think the direction is we need to go ahead and move forward with SDG&E sooner rather than later, right? And I assume that you're doing that as we speak. So if we can get that.
We'll also be circling back to the staffs that we're working with at the 3 cities and let them know, that we've had our update and the results of the assessment report and what the board, has in front of them for consideration, and with regards to timing of whether, we enroll in April 2024 or, so it's not a question of do we want them to join, because we do want them to join. It's a question of, when is it the best time to begin serving those cities and, be selling them electricity. And, is April 2024, is that just, fraught with too much risk from the procurement end? And, do we, wait and postpone and begin serving them in 2025? But, the question of whether or not we want to bring them on, I think there's no question this board is supportive of bringing those cities on and serving those customers.
Agreed. Okay. Thank you for that update. All right. We are on to item number 11, and I'll turn this back to you.
Thank you, Chair Becker. I don't have a formal presentation. The item for the board for consideration is authorizing the board chair and CEO to execute an agreement with Pattern SC Holdings for resource adequacy for a 15-year term beginning June 2023 for an amount not to exceed $6.5 million. And this agreement is in compliance with a California Public Utilities Commission mandated procurement, commonly known as the midterm reliability procurement mandate. At the end of last year, the PUC did issue a directive that all load serving entities needed to procure these additional resources to come online, coming up as early as June 2023, to address the issues that our board member Musgrove mentioned, which is, this reliability issues and these seems to be more frequent summer brownouts and flex alerts. And so the PUC is very focused on wanting to add resources as quickly as possible. And so we did join together with the CCAs of Desert Community Energy and California Choice Energy Authority's group of CCAs, and issued a solicitation for projects. And we had very specific criteria given to us by the PUC with regards to projects that the PUC would allow us to enter into. This project does check all the boxes, and we are needing to get it executed and contracted for, so we can continue meeting our requirements from the PUC.
Very good. And I'm excited that we're working with these other CCAs, and that was good news. Is your hand up, Board Member Insco, for this item? Okay.
I am sorry, just forgot to
that's
lower
okay.
that.
All right. Okay, good. And is there anything more you wanted to tell us? I know it's a wind project, and so
it's the wind project. It is not local in San Diego. That is a top priority of ours when we evaluate projects. Unfortunately, the responses we got didn't meet all of the requirements from the PUC with regards to when they could be online, or they may have had challenges with being confident that they could be online and producing energy. We're really looking forward to a time when we're not procuring to meet mandates, but rather we have more discretion, and talking to our local development community and getting our local projects, which is what we really want to be doing. So
I think that's coming, right? Well,
yeah.
That's coming soon. So
yeah.
I would move approval.
All right. I'll second that. Call for the vote.
Member Musgrove,
Yes.
Member Insco,
Yes.
Member Acosta,
Yes.
Vice Chair Drucker,
Yes.
and Chair Becker.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. And I'm just going to assume, even though we've already voted, there was no public comment on that.
There was no public comment.
Very good. Thank you. All right. Do we have any requests for future agenda items? Do we have anything? All right. Okay. Our next meeting, it's a regular board meeting on June 30th, 2022 at 2 p.m.
We actually have a special meeting that the board just approved on June 23rd.
That's right.
Very good.
Does that allow us to have the other meeting on the 30th, Barbara?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll do another 2 to 5 minute meeting. And that's special meeting. Yes,
Can I get 5 seconds, Chair?
yes, please.
I just want to comment that one of our Community Advisory Committee members, Kevin Norris, has been on for the entire meeting, and I appreciate him tuning in. Thank you.
Very good. More knowledge coming. All right, I think that